This is Speak Earth. I'm Case Bradford. Thank you for tuning in to this episode with Olyveya. I really enjoyed making this episode. Olyveya shared her journey becoming a professional ballerina. So we spoke about the art and practice of ballet, as well as the history of ballet, which I thought was funny and interesting. And we also spoke about Olyveya's health journey. She went on a carnivore diet to heal her body, mind, and had amazing results. We discuss that part of her life experience, sharing some of the tactical details, as well as some broader philosophies around nutrition, diet, and eating carnivore. We spoke about much more, including stimulation versus nourishment, sewing your own outfits. Really enjoyed this convo, and I appreciate you tuning in. If this is your first time listening, thank you. If you are a returning listener, welcome back. Appreciate you tuning in. If you'd like to contribute to Peak Earth, I came up with a few ideas. One is to share an episode out across social media or to a friend. Another is to leave a 5-star review on the Apple app or the Spotify app. Those always give me good vibes, put a smile on my face. The third idea is to set aside some time and plan out a replica of the Great Pyramids. Just so you know, the Great Pyramid is made of about 2.3 million blocks. You can Google this. I know that sounds wild and insane. It is, but 2.3 million blocks, and each of those blocks weighs between 5,000 and 30,000 pounds. So I know this isn't a small ask, but if they did it way back then, I'm sure you could figure it out today. Just build a replica of the Great Pyramids. You can name it the Peak Earth Podcast Pyramid. I think that would clue a lot of people into this podcast, and that would be a cool way to contribute. So of course you don't need to do any of those things. I appreciate you tuning in. Thank you. I hope you enjoy this episode with Olyveya. How are you?
Good, and you?
Doing great. Thank you. Glad we were able to connect. I first found out about you online. I was absolutely fascinated by what you're up to. It's very unique and original, and it's very much not something that you see like on both fronts. You were a professional ballerina and also practicing the carnivore diet, and are passionate about both, and mixing them together is really powerful. And I'm sure there's a lot more to you than just those two things as well. But I know that's sort of like top of what you share. But I'm really excited to drop in and learn more about your story.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. I'm really excited.
So I guess a good starting point would just be to maybe talk about your creativity on the internet. When did you start creating and sharing things online?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. I started sharing stuff online in, I think it was like July of 2022. I was doing this summer camp for ballet. Every summer, it's a very common thing once you train professionally that you go away for like 6 weeks and you train intensively in a different state or a different country. And after doing that, we had a photographer at this one camp, and I had all these nice pictures, and I thought, well, I want to share them. But then I also thought, well, I'm doing this weird diet, and all my classmates at this intensive thought it was odd, but they were also very supportive. So I thought it'd be hilarious if I started showing, like posting online the pretty ballet pictures, but then also what I was eating. So then I just started to post it a bit. And then, yeah, that was July of 2022. And then since then, I just kept doing it.
Cool. Yeah, it's ballet is fascinating to me because it's almost harkens back to an older time in a way. I don't know why, because I know there's obviously still ballet going on, but it's almost like seeing a hand painted painting. Like it's got that similar vibe, or like classical music. Like it evokes this like timeless classic where it's like, wow, this is incredible. Some of the movements that you do they must have taken so long to be able to train to do them.
Yeah. Usually, I don't think a lot of people are aware of this, but usually it's like you'll do ballet as a child until you're 8 or 12 years old. And then once you hit that age mark of 8 or 12, you have to decide whether you want to take it professionally and choose that for like your career for life, or you just don't, and you just continue it as a hobby. And then from that age, it's another full 8 years of training before you can begin to like be an apprentice or work professionally. And even then, sometimes it's not quite enough. Some people need 9 years or 10 years. And yeah, it's a lot of work put into the craft.
Wow. Yeah. And eight years, what does the training during that time consist of? Like, what is being practiced mostly within the art of ballet?
Yeah, so the first 2 years kind of starts. So my background is I did ballet as a child and it was kind of a hobby, and then I quit for a while, and then I restarted when I was 14, and then I had to restart again when I was 17. So I didn't have the proper 8 years, but typically the first 2 years is very simple and what seems like very boring movement. So everything that you see where you just like bend and stretch at the bar with your knees, that's it. For like 2 whole years, that's all you're doing. And it's to make sure that your body will kind of what you're doing in these 2 years is you're forcing your hips and your back and your bones and your legs to basically to grow in a different way than naturally the human body should. So since you're still young enough, you're forcing your body to grow in a different way than it naturally would, and that's what doing these exercises does. So that's the first 2 years. And then the third and fourth year, you add on a bit more difficult steps, but it's still very basic. And then in the fifth year, you start to add on more so difficult steps, and you make it a bit more, let's say, like creative. And then that's when you would start learning partnering, so dancing with a partner, and then you'd also learn like different types of dance. And then the last 2 years, the seventh and eighth year, it's more so fine-tuning how you as an individual dance, because there's a lot of different movements and you have the core principles of how you should do it, but depending on your body type and how it looks on you and how you perform it, you would kind of fine-tune it to how best it suits you. So that's kind of like everything summed up.
Wow. I didn't realize all that. Do you know the history of ballet by any chance?
A bit, yeah. It actually started out, I think it was King Louis XV in France. So it started out for men. And the whole point was to be able, the reason why we're very turned out, like you have to be flat, your feet are basically turned out instead of like this, is because they wanted to be able to move sideways, kind of like a crab, for whatever reason. And so that was the whole gist of that. And then King Louis XV, for whatever reason, decided that he fell in love with it and kind of made it part of the culture to force people to train ballet so that people actually knew how to dance it. And then I don't remember what year it was, but then the Russians overtook it, and then they became like the leading people who actually could create ballet so that it would be even higher technique and a lot more competitive, let's say, like a lot more gymnastic and not quite so simple and just like basic movements. So that was kind of that. And then it came over to the US. I think it was like maybe 40s, 50s, something like that. And they made it a bit jazzier. So they kind of added like the Rockettes kind of twist to ballet. And then that's kind of stayed actually for a very long time. So there's all these different styles of ballet. So the US has its own, Russia has its own, French ballet has its own, and Italian is slightly different. So then that's kind of like how it stayed.
Wow. So you decided at an early age to take up ballet and then choose to train it intensively enough to become professional, aside from the one gap that you took for a while?
Yeah, I really loved it, and I think I was 4 years old when I started to do it, and I was living in Jordan at the time, so it's a Muslim country, so they don't really have much dance because it's just not a thing. So it was very recreational. And then when I was 8 years old, we moved from Jordan to Uruguay, and we couldn't find a teacher until I think it was like 13 and a half. And I was able, for whatever reason, to get into their national ballet school. And it was a lot more intense, but it still wasn't really a high level. And then when I was 17, we moved from Uruguay to Croatia, and that's where I met my teacher that actually taught me like from scratch ballet. And he was a graduate of the Vaganova Academy, which is in Russia, and that's the best ballet school in the world. So he was very strict, and it was very different for me to learn that way. But yes, from a young age, I decided that I wanted to do that.
How did it feel to see that dream come true?
It was a bit underwhelming because obviously everyone thinks that it's really glamorous and beautiful, but then you start to see like the reality of the world in ballet, and it's really quite depressing. So that was partly why I wanted to leave. So it's like, it's okay. So finally being able to like reach a point of where I actually dreamed of being was not as amazing as I thought it would be. So yeah.
It's amazing how we have these dreams as kids. Like, who sometimes I wonder who, like, where do we get those things? It's almost as if we were born with them in our mind, and it can drive us for so long, and then we learn a lot through that process, and then at some point get to take what we've learned and go from there. And I'm wondering, along the journey of becoming a professional ballet dancer, were there parts of that journey that you learned some unique lessons or some challenges that you faced it and overcame? Or how did that journey shape the person that you are today?
Yeah, lots of lots of challenges. I think a lot of it was just I used to be very, I don't know what word to use other than like egotistical. Like I was very confident, let's say, about myself. And ballet just shattered that. So now at least I'm a bit more self-aware and it makes me more humbling. So if I do something that I think is impressive, I don't bother to like, which is probably a bad thing, I don't bother to like put it on display or anything because I just think, well, anyone could do that because it's not so amazing. So that was something that I learned, but I think it is useful to the extent of I don't want to be overly confident and think that I can just do anything. It's good for kind of, okay, I've done this, what can I do? So it's been great for me being able to achieve a lot of different things in my life and also to like do many different things at once. So not just like working in one thing, but working in like 5 different things at once and keeping it consistent and actually following through. So that's where it's been very useful.
It sounds a little like martial arts in a way that I know training some of my experience training martial arts, it can be very humbling as well, just to kind of focus on the practice instead of the results, to be more process oriented and knowing that no matter what the result was, there's always a new challenge coming. And although for me, it was a little bit of the opposite approach where I was really unconfident and not sure of myself. And it helped me have a little bit more confidence and just like having the ability to be able to like defend myself if need be, or just knowing that like I have some like felt more at home in my body and like more comfortable just being me for whatever reason. It really helped me kind of find that in myself. And maybe there's something to do with like masculine and feminine energies in there too, but that's maybe a little woo woo, but also kind of an interesting part of life that I didn't really get introduced to until my sort of later 20s, where, understanding like there's these different dynamics at play inside all of us and we have to try and like manage them. It's, I don't know, kind of went off on a tangent there, but it's so interesting how movement helps our mind. It's just been such a core fascination for me, especially now that once I learned the next level in my journey, which was like training in nature, and then finding like, whoa, this really impacts my mind in a beneficial way too. There's so much going on within movement aside from just like burning calories and building muscle, I feel like.
Yeah, I think like part of it, because I did a bit of martial arts, probably not at all to the extent of how you've done it or you're doing it now. But I think just in general, having a certain form of movement teaches you at least to be able to enjoy the process, maybe even more so than the actual result. Because like sometimes if it's like relating to work, you can relate it to like almost anything. If you want to achieve something, you're probably more focused on what the outcome is. And then once you get there, it's like, oh, that's not quite as gratifying. Whereas if you enjoy the process more, it makes the end a lot more gratifying because you enjoy the process more than the actual result. So I think that's also like a big takeaway from, I think, just most movement in general.
That's deep and powerful. And I believe, hopefully I'm not wrong about this, but I saw that you did retire from ballet recently, right?
Yes, yeah.
I was speaking to someone I met at the beach, and she said she was a professional ballerina and said that professional ballerinas actually all retire at a really early age. Like I think she said 25 is like a really old age for a ballerina or something. That blew my mind. I was not aware of that at all.
Yeah. It a lot of people can go, at least more so before when we were a lot healthier, people would continue dancing until they're like 40. That was very old. But now if you're 30, that's already pushing it, and 25 is kind of like a standard stopping point. So yeah, it's a very short career.
Wow. What are you moving on to now that you've got your whole life ahead of you, basically? Because the funny thing is, like, 25 is still very young.
Yeah. Yeah. 25 is very young. Yeah, now, well, for almost a whole year now, I've been working with a company that it's a bit more of a tech company now. So I'm kind of working in tech, but still very health related. And it's kind of like
Nice.
my new thing that I'm very passionate about because we're trying to get the word of like alternative health, basically all forms of health and unbiased information out there for general population and everyone. And it's not easy, but it will be at some point very gratifying. So that's where I'm working now. I work as like a product manager as well as like a social media manager. And yeah, that's what I'm doing now, and that's hopefully what I'll be doing for a while.
Cool. Love that. It's definitely something we need with the current health of the people of this world, and in America, especially really ailing. And I know that you've had some health struggles throughout your journey as a ballerina as well, that you addressed with the carnivore diet, going on a meat-based diet. I was reading a bit on your website about the journey that you went through, and it's really astounding and powerful, because I remember when I first learned about the carnivore diet, it was really pretty crazy. And I think a lot of people had that first initial reaction to it that was like, whoa, only eating meat? There's no way that's good for you. But now we're at a place where so many people have benefited from this approach, yourself included. How do you describe the carnivore diet now that you've benefited from it tremendously?
Well, now I think I originally started it as just like a quick fix. I wanted a very quick fix because I started in January of 2022, and I was um 19 at the time, and I was auditioning for a ballet company in Serbia because that's where I was living, and they didn't want to take me on because I was overweight. That was the only reason why they didn't want me. So then I had got that comment many different times, and I finally thought, okay, I've had enough. I want to fix this. So I found the carnivore diet. I had previously tried it when I was 16, but then I came back to it when I was 19. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to go straight in and try it again. And this time it worked. And I think it's because I was also in a different mindset and a different environment. And for whatever reason, it worked. And for me, I think carnivore diet is great for, let's say, a year and a half maximum to just give your body a full on reset. As for doing it for like the rest of your life, unless you absolutely had to, I wouldn't do that because it just gets a bit restrictive, as in you can't go out and meet new people because what are you going to do? Not everyone wants to kind of cater to it. There are a lot of people that are very nice. Like, I've never had an issue, but I just think it would be a bit less awkward to include other foods. Plus, I don't want to teach my body to not be able to handle something if there's an emergency for whatever reason. I'm randomly in the middle of a forest and there's nothing around. I want to be able to tolerate a plant because that is definitely in my future. So yeah. Yeah. So now I think of it as like an elimination diet. You do it for a short period, reset your body, give it a rest, and then you can slowly move back to, I think definitely animal-based diet would be the way to go.
Beautiful. And how did you learn about the carnivore diet? What was that like, coming across it for the first time and deciding to try it out?
Yeah, when I was 16, I was a bit overweight, and looking back, I can see that it was probably more so inflammation because for most of my life, I was brought up eating a paleo diet, so I was very healthy and never really had any issues. And then I started going to that ballet school in Uruguay, and the whole building was covered in mold. And I got mono, and since then, I just kind of got inflamed and stayed that way. And I just thought I was getting overweight because I was 16 and couldn't really think of any other reason why. So I asked my mom, what can I do to fix this? Because it was getting to a point where I was just very self aware about it. And she had tried the Atkins diet, which was basically like keto. And she recommended, why don't you try the keto diet? So I did that when I was 16. And then after watching a bunch of different videos on YouTube, Sean Baker got recommended to me. So then I tried the carnivore diet for a bit. But because I was in a not so great environment, both just physically and mentally, I don't think it was working very well. I also didn't have access to great foods. It wasn't like eating ground beef or steaks, it was like processed meats. So that wasn't working too well either. So I kind of ditched that until January of 2022. But during all that time, I was animal based. So it was almost zero plants. I would just have like chocolate and sauces, which obviously isn't great either. And then I found it again because I was trying to kind of get myself out of like a depressive episode. So I was listening to Alan Watts, which brought me to Jordan Peterson, which brought me to Michaela Peterson, and that's how I refound it again. Yeah.
Awesome. It's so cool how the internet will lead us to these ideas if we use it intentionally and are trying to learn and grow, and we can find these ideas that may seem crazy to some but are actually can be really helpful. And it's oftentimes like contrary to what the mainstream culture will be accepting. Like there are people out there who probably think, maybe nobody listening to this, but there are people out there who think that meat is unhealthy, and then you've got people who are like, I've actually only been eating meat for years and I'm amazingly healthy. It's just so funny because you can't, if meat isn't healthy, there's no way you can only eat meat for years and like still be healthy.
Yeah, there's no other just one food that you can eat forever and it'll have everything in it. So how can it not be healthy? I don't get how people can argue with that, but they do.
Yeah. I mean, I guess these large organizations that create news articles and various forms of media are pretty persuasive and powerful still, even though they've been lying for decades to a lot of people. I think there's still a pretty persuasive element to having the authority of saying these studies say meat is unhealthy, and they've been saying that for so long. But the power of a carnivore diet, like you mentioned, as an elimination diet and as a way to help people access a higher level of vitality, presents such a broad range of nutrients. And I think that goes unrecognized when people are only talking about things like cholesterol, which is probably healthy overall. Probably another lie, which I think is well understood by most people, that cholesterol helps our body. But when it comes to eating a diet of only meat, what kind of meats would you eat? Like, what would a daily diet or a weekly diet sort of look like for anyone interested to try this to have higher health?
Yeah. So for me, I kind of tried all forms of carnivore diet. I think unless you have like a very specific health condition, I would keep it, at least in the start, filled with variety. So like all cuts of meat and then a bit of dairy, but not too much because that can kind of cause like a setback. I think the like optimal, let's say, way to do it would just be most ruminant animals, sometimes some good quality pork and chicken. But yeah, it's very simple unless you have like a health condition where you would keep out something. But yeah, that's kind of it.
And then from that foundation, would that look like a lot of ground beef for you, or a lot of steaks? Like maybe ground beef for lunch and then steak for dinner? Did you ever eat organ meats? Like if you were to describe in a bit more detail, how does that play out?
Yeah. So right now it's more so like I'll have a few eggs in the morning. I'll eat twice a day. So I think that's the easiest way to do it. Once a day, at least for me, doesn't work, and 3 times a day just seems a bit excessive. So for breakfast, I'll have a few eggs and some cheese. So it's kind of like an omelet. And then for lunch or dinner-ish, I'll mostly have ground beef. And now I'm adding in like some avocados or some pickles. But if you're not doing that, then you would just have ground beef, or you could have like a steak. Sometimes I'll do that. Or there's a lot of different roasts that you can have, which is easy to make, with some butter or some sour cream, or any form of topping that could be, I would say, fattier. That's not really so filled with just like the dairy, but a fattier thing. And that's, it.
Cool. It's simple and easy. And while you're eating in this way, are you experiencing any cravings or callings to consume other kinds of foods that your mind is sort of presenting for you to eat, or is it perfectly satiating and you're good to go with that meal plan?
Yeah, when I've been feeling my best right now, for whatever reason, I still think that it's just the air quality and I don't feel great. I just feel kind of stuck. So I do feel not cravings, but like it's not quite fulfilling, let's say, or satiating. But when I was feeling my best, I would just eat that, and I would just go on with my day. There was no other thought in my mind about it. Even now, so I think it's just I've been doing a lot of different types of detoxing as well right now. So it just overall kind of makes you tired and not feeling great. So I think that's playing into it. But yeah, eating that way will definitely fill you up and you don't really think about anything else because you have that one thing. And the great thing about it being those are the only options that you have is once you've eaten, you're like, that's it. I'm full. I don't need to think about anything else that I could have or want to have. And then you can move on with your life.
It's beautiful and really has the potential to help so many people. And I don't know how many thousands, maybe millions of people have already benefited from this approach. And it's really I think a lot of the beauty comes from the simplicity of it, where it doesn't need to be this extravagant sort of, process of procuring all these like fresh vegetables all the time and making a salad. And like that approach, it does work for some people, but it can also be really overly complex and make the health journey a lot more difficult.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because now I'm meeting most people that I meet, even though I'm not meeting them through like diet or health stuff, just random people that I'll meet. Hilariously enough, they're all like very much animal based, or at least they've heard about the diet or something. And I'm like, we're going in the right direction, so that's good.
Yes. Yeah. I think for me, it's been pretty similar where a lot of people I meet do have the foundation of their diet is a lot like we just described it. It's beef, it's eggs, some dairy products. And then from that foundation, some people will have some other things. Other people will not have other things. And there's a lot to be said around how we, add various herbs or teas or coffee or not. But I fully believe that if you make the foundation of your diet exactly as you just described, you're going to be like that. That is the key to health and nutrition, at least from a nutrition angle. That's going to be really the key to just have nutrient dense food, which is going to be ruminant meat, like you just described, and then eggs and some dairy. And it's such a powerful approach to eating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's a great movement, and I'm happy that it's actually happening. So.
Me too. Yeah, and I think there's this other interesting aspect of this, which is sitting down to a meal of just steak, where okay, it's like the main dish, but then there's always this pull to add like side dishes. Wherever it's just part of our culture, like to think that we need to have the side dish as well with the main dish. But simply enjoying being able to sit down and enjoy like just a steak or just a burger is an interesting mindfulness practice in a way, because it is really all you need ultimately. And just being able to enjoy that as a simple meal can be a powerful practice for people who tend to maybe seek too much variety in a meal, which can oftentimes maybe come from like a desire for entertainment in a way.
Yeah, I think, well, because I moved to the US a bit over a year ago, and it's not really common in most other countries to have like many different types of foods all the time. It's very stimulating, and I think that's what the main issue is. And people here, at least, they don't realize that that's not really normal anywhere else, because in Uruguay, it was normal to just have the meat and the salad, and that was absolutely it. And it was the same in Serbia and Croatia. You would have meat and a cheese sauce and sometimes a salad, and that was it. There was no like all these other billions of different things. So it's fairly common in other countries to just have like the 3 things or 2 things and that's it, whereas here it's like the 10 different items and then you have dessert with another 10 different items, and it's just like it's not food anymore, it's just entertainment.
It is so strange what we've done to food in this country, in this like time that we're living. It's incredibly bizarre. But another angle of this is that we can do some really amazing things to our food. I think a great example would be some of the convenience food options that we have available when we're traveling. When you are seeking to maintain a nutrient dense diet when you're on the road, are there certain brands or food options that have come in clutch for you?
Yeah, well, right now, whenever I do travel, the only thing that I'll travel with is like the Carnivore bar. Because it's just the easiest thing. You don't have to worry about whether it's refrigerated or not, or how long it can last, and it's almost a full meal. To me, it's not fully a full meal unless I'm not doing anything. But yeah, that's it. That's very easy to eat. It's good in my opinion. Other than that, sometimes I'll try and make my own beef jerky, or if it's like a 1-day trip, then I'll cook something. You can just basically whip up an egg and put it in the oven and you have a muffin. So that's very easy. That's all there is to it. So it's great. But yeah, so it's pretty easy to actually travel eating just like certain foods. It's just a matter of figuring out how.
Yeah, takes a little creativity. What are your thoughts on the recent trend of people eating raw meat, raw eggs? What do you think about that?
I would not do it, at least in this country. I don't have a problem with raw meat. I've done it before. I ate a full raw steak. I've eaten raw liver and raw heart and all that. But I find that regardless of where the meat is produced here, you always have like pesticides or something blowing over into it. And there's no way, unless you're dipping it in like lemon juice or vinegar or something, there's no way to kind of hopefully clean that off, because even that's not going to clean it off. So that's where I would tend to not do that. I don't think I would do that now.
I did not have raw meat as on my trending diet bingo card for this year, but it's really taking the internet by storm. It's I think part of it is just because of how controversial it is, and then that kind of promotes it in the algorithm to make it seem like it's, going viral all the time. But there are some people who really swear by it. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I've met a lot of people who are like, it's a religion to them where it has to be raw, and any way that you cook it, even if it's really slowly and using a fire even, it's still going to ruin it completely. Like you 100% just ruined all the nutrients in it. And I don't know. To me, if you cook it, let's say on the outside a bit and you leave the inside raw, that would be the way to eat it. So
I agree. I prefer rare meat myself as opposed to raw. It just tastes better too. Have a little sear on there.
Yeah, 100%.
Outside of diet and nutrition, are there any other health practices that you use to maintain high vitality state?
Yeah, now I've kind of come to the conclusion that at least for most different health conditions, the like cure all is just reducing your stress levels or your cortisol levels. So regardless of if you're doing everything right, but you have your stress levels are high, you're not going to be able to fix whatever it is that you have. So that's kind of like what I've been delving into more so now, is just how do you reduce that? And that can just be basic things like if you enjoy walking, that can be your kind of meditative time to relax a bit. Or if you're in a high stressful environment, you can go and just like sit and listen to music, or just find something that's kind of like meditational that'll just relax you. So that's been my more so recent thing that I've been getting into, which also puts me into like a happier mindset, which is also very healing, I think, because you can do everything right, but if your stress levels are high, I think your body's still going to be on like a fight or flight mode, and that's just not going to help it heal.
Yeah, that's a really powerful point. I think it's like the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. We've got to have one online and then the other, and being able to toggle and shift between the two, one and to be able to rest and digest, and then the other to be able to do what we need to do. And then the modern work environment, which is tend to be, I think, a little bit stressful for most people, just from the fact that we have to stare into these computer screens and then have to deal with all kinds of pings and dings and the 10,000 notifications that flow through our eyeballs every day that need, processing so much information on a daily basis is like weirdly stressful, even though it's not anything akin to what our ancestors may have faced. Something like, it's not an immediate threat to us, but it's just having to deal with a flood of information every day is just like stressful in a way that's difficult to mitigate and manage.
Right. I think it's definitely a lot. It's definitely not like going to war or something, which is obviously stressful, but I think it just makes it a bit more stressful because you're constantly stimulated and then you have to like go and do something. It's like when they test lab rats or something, when they like zap them and then they have to go do something. It's kind of like that, where it's stressful and you know it's coming, but you don't know when. But because it's kind of normal, because it's outside of work as well, you don't really recognize it as like a stressor. So then I think that makes it ever so slightly worse. So yeah, it's not helping the stress levels.
Yeah, that's a great point. Wow. Yeah, it is sort of this like undercover, you never know when, you're going to get, so have to do something based, especially if a lot of us are probably working in a remote work environment and maybe have to be somewhat on call, not 24/7, but like to some degree where we get the privilege of not having to go to an office, but also that comes with the responsibility of like always being somewhat open to working based on pings that may come through our smartphones at any time. It's a strange reality, but it's I think it, like you mentioned, really, really important to have those nourishing practices. There's a guy I made a previous podcast episode with named Rafe Kelly. He presented this idea of stimulant versus nourishment. And it's really valuable way to look at a lot of things. The way that you relax and are entertained, it can be like stimulating, or it can be more nourishing. We can be on our phone scrolling, and that's like very stimulating, or we can be going for a walk outside, which is more nourishing. And similar way to look at food that we eat. Some food is more stimulating and other food is more nourishing. I think that can be a really valuable perspective to take on how we lay out our lifestyle.
Yeah, I think like the main problem with like modern society is that people just can't go back to like basic living. You have to have like 100 different things stimulating you at once, and that's including food. Like kids get so used to TikTok or something which has like 2 videos playing at once, plus the captions, plus someone talking and like music in the background, because it's just not enough happening at once, so they get bored, versus just going for a walk and having your thoughts thinking about stuff is naturally how you should be. It's obviously a lot more nourishing and a lot less stressful, but because we're not accustomed to that, it seems so boring and you don't want to do it because it's not giving anything back to you, when it's giving a lot more back to you than the other option.
Well said. Yeah, it is a wild experience logging onto social media sometimes and seeing a video where they've got 10,000 things going on, the captions, the pop-up, the video inside the video. And it just feels like such a circus when the best thing for me to do when I can feel my cortisol levels increasing. And the second I start looking into it, I just go to turn it off and just go kind of sit outside for a while to and just breathe and renormalize my cortisol levels, because you can really feel it, and that can lead to disease if we let that fire of inflammation and cortisol get out of control.
Yeah, definitely. That's where it's good to just put it away.
Yeah. And I would say that other part of this that is really important for anyone listening is at night, once the sun has set, really essential to try and limit, if not completely eliminate, electronics. And I think that the biggest culprit is watching TV late at night. And oftentimes what's on TV is like pretty violent and stimulating, and is going to essentially ruin a lot of the sleep that comes after that. This is just another thing that is the more nourishing path would be something like reading or writing or literally anything other than watching TV. But it's a tough sell, and it makes me feel like a curmudgeonly old man saying that, but that's like a deep truth that I want to try and communicate.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with that, because I used to have these sleep problems where I could only sleep for like 4 hours a night, and it was because I was watching, even if it wasn't like a violent movie or something, but because it was entertainment right before going to sleep, I would have these very vivid dreams, so I felt like I was awake the whole time. So then you're getting like no sleep. So it's not really helpful to do that, because you might think I'll wind down by watching a movie, but then at least with myself, it was very impactful upon my dreams, which would kind of keep my whole body awake throughout all of that. And then I wasn't getting any sleep. So I think, yeah, putting away the phone, not watching something it makes a huge difference.
Absolutely. Difficult to do, but really worthwhile to have a new habit, more nourishing habit, especially at night when it comes to winding down, getting deep regenerative sleep, and not being stimulated deep into the night hours. Yeah. So what kind of things are you working on with the new project integrating health and technology, like you mentioned? What does that look like day to day?
Yeah, so right now we're doing a lot of more so tech stuff, but we're planning on actually rolling out this new platform, which will kind of be like a new form of web search, where you'll have all of the information, but instead of having top search results based off of officials who decided that it should be there or not showing the results of something, it will just have everything unbiased. And that could be a way where people independently have the choice to learn for themselves. Because learning about diet, it's a lot easier now because there's a lot of people posting about it online, but it's still difficult as a new person to go to like Google and just think, okay, carnivore diet, but where and how do I start learning about it? So we're creating a platform where it'll kind of simplify that. And then that could be for any topic. It doesn't have to be diet related. It could be like if you want to learn about playing the violin or something. It's simplifying it where you have everything and you're able to access that. So that's kind of what we're working on. And there's a lot going into it on the back end of like how in the world that happens. So it's a lot of creativity, which is a lot of fun because, yeah, I love creating stuff with like the ballet. It's a lot of creativity. So I'm very happy that that's part of it. Yes, that's most of what we're doing right now.
Oh, cool. So that's like a new Google search in a way, an alternative to Google.
Kind of, yeah.
Wow, that's a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. So we're very excited.
Nice. Yeah, that's been a sort of disappointing realization over the past 4 years since 2020, seeing some of the big tech censorship of honest information that came as a surprise to me a little bit. I didn't, or maybe I just wasn't aware of the kind of censorship that went on, or maybe they became a lot more aggressive about it during the lockdowns. But that's been definitely a little bit unsettling. So another thing that raises my stress levels, seeing the way some of these big companies have kind of encroached on what we thought were our rights as citizens, even though they're private companies. I guess technically they can censor whatever they want. It's still a little bit unsettling to think that companies would choose to do that.
Yeah, it's unsettling, but it's also just very, because you assume that it's like government based and then it's all open source where you can find who's funding this and who's heading that, where you can't really find any of that information. Because I've spent hours trying to find out with like different big organizations and it's just hidden. You can't find it anywhere. So it's very frustrating and also concerning because you wonder, okay, I'm paying for that, but I don't really know who and why they're doing this, like who's connected to it. So yeah, someone needs to create an alternative to that because it's not truthful, put very simply.
Yeah. And it makes me think, it's amazing, something you mentioned earlier in our conversation, that you were raised on a paleo diet. How did your parents find out about the paleo diet? Like, and were they always clued in on that? Or because I remember finding out about it in 2011. I heard a podcast episode and it blew my mind. I thought it was just the coolest thing ever. And I started eating in a paleo way, and it remediated a lot of the acne that I had and helped a lot of the anxiety and depression that I was dealing with up to that point. I think I was like 21 at the time. So it was like a pretty big revelation for me, and something that I was really passionate about at the time. But what was it like being raised under that way of eating?
Yeah, I have an older sister, and I think that she didn't really quite enjoy it quite as much because we would have friends who would be like, here's a Kit Kat, here's Skittles, and I would be like, yeah, I don't really care, I don't want it, but my sister was always like, ooh, since I can't have it, I want it. But yeah, no, my mom has always been very, she hasn't ever, whenever there's an alternative path that we can take, she's always taken it, as in like any medical institution. So we haven't really gone to conventional healthcare because she's had a bad experience in the past. So she's always just, as much as possible, try to find an alternative. And I'm not really sure how she found the paleo diet. I think it was more so because she already knew about Atkins diet, but then a way to integrate carbs into that diet would kind of be like a paleo, whole foods, healthy, organic way. So I think that's how. And then she thought, well, this is probably the healthiest way to raise children. So I think that's how she got into that. But yeah, I didn't really mind it as a child. I thought it was fine because I didn't really care. My sister didn't love it though. So there's that.
Yeah, it's interesting because it has a story behind it, and the story is like, well, this is the way human beings have been eating for the most part, for most of our history, as opposed to some of the other diets which seem to be more based around like modern science or I guess, religious beliefs in some cases. I think veganism probably started, or vegetarianism. I think both probably started under a religious belief, which may have been based around who knows what. I don't know.
Yeah, the First Day Adventists were the ones that started. I think it was either less meat or they started with all the greens, and it was to kind of create infertile men, I believe, something like that.
That's not good.
No, it's not good. No.
That's not good. And then there's the ketogenic diet, which that was massive for a long while, and that was based off just the scientific understanding that if we consume a lot of fat and not much sugar and carbohydrates, our body will go into ketosis, and that got huge and during some point in the past like 10 years, but it seems to be drawing back in popularity now.
Yeah, well, it originally started as a treatment for diabetics and then people who had epilepsy, so epileptics, because it would be able to heal the brain. So it was able to send these ketones to power your brain to use the ketones as energy to be able to heal it. And then they realized that it also had this amazing weight loss potential. But then it got popular, and then all these companies started making these keto snacks. So then now it's kind of losing popularity because people all think, well, it doesn't work. But that's because they're not following it as like a whole foods keto diet. So hopefully it gains popularity again. I don't know. We'll see.
It seems to me that a carnivore diet is essentially a ketogenic diet, except they're just cutting out those keto snacks.
Yes. Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah.
In a way, I guess within a ketogenic diet, you could probably have some vegetables and some fruits in addition to that and still be in ketosis.
Yeah, there's like some things that you can do or consume that would keep it down. Like if you're eating high fiber products, that would reduce the amount of carbs, which would bring it to like you would track your net carbs instead of total carbs. And then that would reduce, your carbohydrate intake. So it is possible to eat a lot of different plants. It's even possible to do a vegan keto diet. I don't know how you survive off of that, but it is possible. But I think, carnivore keto diet would be the way to go. And then you can consume for carbohydrates like a tiny bit of honey. Like you can have, I think it's 1 to almost 2 tablespoons worth of honey and still be in ketosis for a full day. So there's ways of doing it to make it kind of animal based or carnivore.
Within this entire realm of going on a specific diet to achieve a specific result, whatever it is, do you think that's the right approach for a lot of people who are just trying to get healthy? Do you think adopting one of these specific diets, maybe you'd probably suggest the carnivore diet, but maybe not? Like, what would you say to someone listening who wanted to get healthy and they're curious which of these diets to try?
Well, yeah, if they're just not feeling good about themselves and it's not a severe health condition, I would probably start with just like animal based but lower carb. So maybe almost keto diet, animal based, just to have I think it's great to have a routine and something that'll always be there that you can stick with. So I think that's a great starting point. And then if that's not doing so well, and your body's also not feeling great because of whatever reason, it could just be environment, or if you have a health condition or something, then I would do like an elimination full-on carnivore diet for probably 30 days to 3 months, and then slowly go back to an animal-based or paleo diet, because I think animal-based / paleo is probably the original of that. Animal-based is just the more popular version right now, but I think paleo is probably the one diet that you would stick with for always if you want to have a healthy, long, happy life. So yeah, that's what I would go with.
I think that's great advice, cutting out some of the most inflammatory foods, focusing on eating the nutrient dense ones and giving your body the nutrients that it needs, and cutting out some of the more inflammatory foods so that you can get more into a state of regeneration and health and high vitality. And then from there, you could probably eat some more foods if you wanted in different social situations, or if you were, for whatever reason, called to have, a big lasagna or whatever it is that you feel like having on occasion. It's a real bummer that we're at a place in society where there are so many health issues, but we also have these answers that are effective, and they're simple and they're really doable. I think a lot of times maybe there's just a mentality that gets in the way. Like you mentioned with your sister who wanted to eat the Kit Kat because she knew she wasn't allowed to. It's I think that is what we call the forbidden fruit effect, where if we tell ourselves that we can't have something, that whatever that thing is becomes more alluring because we simply can't have it. So it's so interesting navigating a lot of these waters, but it can be a fun little challenge in a game, and the rewards are definitely worthwhile.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like if someone is struggling with like they tell themselves that they can't have something and they can tolerate, I think it's just okay, go ahead and buy that, eat it. Now that you know you can have it, you don't want it. So then that's a way of just like quickly getting around it, is you just get it over with. But yeah, it's definitely true where if you think that you can't have it and you're trying so hard not to have it, you're going to want it even more when you probably don't even care.
Yes. I personally, the way I like to approach that is focusing on what I do want, focusing on the good things. And this really is applicable like more broadly to mental health in general, is just trying to navigate my mind to focus on the things that I really enjoy, things that nourish me and instead of stimulate me, and the things that I really love. And a lot of times that can be meat, eggs, cheese, milk, making my own homemade ice cream, which is just like eggs, eggs and milk and cream and a little bit of honey, which goes a long way to really nourishing me and stimulating me. Sometimes we can find these things that do a little bit of both. And I think movement practice can be a great way to do that too, where it can be stimulating. You can drop into a flow state. You can really lose yourself within the movement practice, whether it's ballet, martial arts, sprinting, whatever it is that you like to do. And then that's also nourishing. So it's kind of cool to find these like practices that are a synthesis of both stimulation and nourishment that can really elevate our life.
Yeah, I think like as long as like you were saying everything is kind of to just nourish you both mentally, physically, and I guess like for your soul or something, that would be the way to kind of just create your lifestyle so that you're not feeling lacking in anything. Everything is kind of just lifting you up in every way, where it's not stimulating. It is stimulating, but it's not stimulating in that terrible way like you have 100 different notifications and things, bells ringing everywhere. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that's the biggest trap in the modern world, is this like stimulation that comes with empty nourishment, where we get lost scrolling on social media or eating junk food. These things only serve to bring more profits to the people who unfortunately push them on us really aggressively. And when it comes to a realm of nourishment that I think is really underserved in these kinds of conversations, like creativity. You mentioned it earlier that your current job brings you a sense of fulfillment in the realm of creativity. And I wonder if ballet did that for you, or if there's anything else that you're working on in the creative realm that brings you nourishment.
Yeah, definitely. So I've always loved, apart from ballet, I've always loved sewing. So that's kind of like my other creative outlet, is I'll go and sew stuff, whether it's, I used to love making costumes. Sometimes I'll make ballet costumes, or now it's been a lot more clothing. So that's my other creative outlet, because I'll see something online and I'll like it. And then I'm like, I want to have that, but I don't want to have to buy it. So I'll just go and make it. So that's, yeah, my other creative outlet.
Very cool. What are some things that you've sewn?
My outfit actually. Yeah, so I did make this top. So yeah, this is one of them. I made I think it was in January and February of this year. I was competing in ballet and I made both of my costumes, and I think I might have posted them on Twitter. So those I made, and that was a lot of fun. Those are a lot more fun because there's a lot more detail in it, and it takes like months to actually make it and design it and actually have it not fall apart, because you want to be able to stretch it and everything. Yeah.
Wow, that is cool. I will find those outfits that you sewn that you created, and I will link them down below for anyone who wants to see what you made. That's amazing that you can. Yeah, you don't hear that very often as a hobby or a project where you can create your own clothes, but it is another one of these things where it's like, well, we can create our own clothes from scratch. So how long have you been sewing for?
That I've been doing since I was probably like 8. I used to have I think it was like 15 dolls. And I wanted more clothing, but I didn't have, like, throughout the year, because my birthday is very close to Christmas, so I could only get stuff at that time of the year. And then throughout the year, I wanted them to have new clothing or new outfits. So then I just thought, well, if I can't ask for it, then I'm just going to make it. So then since then, it progressed from making clothing for dolls to then myself. So, yeah.
Awesome. Wow. The journey that you're on really is amazing, from becoming a professional ballerina to going on the carnivore diet, learning how to do that and sharing it with others, creating online, sewing your own clothes, and now working in to bring freedom of information to people through health and technology. It's a really cool journey, and I'd like to talk to you for a lot longer, but we don't have much time left. So I'd like to just express my gratitude for you to taking the time to have this conversation with me and share your story with everyone listening. And if there's anything else that you'd like to say with everyone, I'd like to make sure I give you some space here to share whatever else you'd like to say.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me on. I really enjoyed it. And I think, like, the main thing for me is I find all of these different podcasts very helpful, because at least as a young person, when you're first delving into trying to fix your life, you're just trying to find anecdotal information, because that's all that there is right now. So, like, the more that there is out there, the more reassuring and comforting that it is, because typically you rely on, like, a mentor or a doctor or some authoritative person, but because there isn't really that in this space, having these videos or interviews is really useful. That, and then just lowering your stress levels, is all I have to say.
Awesome. Olyveya, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.